Hey everyone, it's Christopher, Mono County Library Director and co-host of the Oxygen Starved podcast. Many of us have experienced these stuck-at-home moments lately. We may be inside quarantining against the latest COVID variant, or we were slammed by those holiday storms across the eastern Sierra that closed the highways, stranded motorists, and snowed many of us into our homes and hotel rooms, forcing on us that antsy get-me-out-of-here state of mind. Well, that happens in spades to the main character of my first Book Talk Friday pick for this week. Paul Sheldon is a romance author who drives his Camaro off the road during a snowstorm and wakes up in the home of Annie Wilkes, a former nurse and, as it happens, a rabid fan of his. This, of course, is the setup for Stephen King's Misery, which came out in 1987. King is writing what must be many of writers' worst nightmare, being put at the mercy of a reader who loves your character so much you're not allowed to kill them off, which is what Paul did with the main character of Annie's favorite series, much to her chagrin. Now, a nurse with a keen sense of practicality, a deadly knowledge of medications, and being righteously protective of her favorite character, whose name is Misery, she terrorizes Paul by keeping him in a prolonged state of recovery from his car crash until he can pen that book that brings Misery back to life. In typical King fashion, as the story unfolds, you learn there's a lot more to Annie Wilkes than meets the eye. Now, Misery came out to great reception, and one thing that made it interesting at the time is that King himself wrote it partially in response to many of his own loyal horror story fan base objecting to a fantasy novel he'd published just a few years before called The Eyes of the Dragon. It went on to be turned into a very popular movie, and it's been adapted for the stage more than once. And in fact, it's still a popular read today, and it brings me to my pick for the new this week. Hell of a Book by Jason Mott just came out this spring to great reviews. Now, some of you may be familiar with one of Mott's earlier books, The Returned, which Brad Pitt adapted for a TV series a number of years ago. Hell of a Book is also about a writer struggling with the expectations set on him by his public and his publisher. This isn't horror, though. It's satire, and it's fun satire at that. In fact, in the opening, we meet the writer running naked down a hotel hallway for his life as he's being chased by the husband of a woman he'd just been sleeping with. This sets the tone for the book that isn't slapstick, but kind of an absurdity that permeates the writer's description of his book tour. Struggling with his addiction with booze, the writer in this book, whose name we never learn, is frequently drunk, which contributes to an is this real or is it a hallucination feeling to many of the scenarios that play out in this novel, including the appearance of a 10-year-old boy who seems to be following the writer around on this book tour and who may be real or may be a figment of his imagination, or may in fact be something else entirely. Mott uses these two characters to explore what it means to be a Black writer in today's America, when the Black Lives Matter movement is forcing a new reckoning and conversation, and the writer character is in fact assigned a consultant in media training, which is code for how the publisher wants the Black writer to act and speak in interviews and book talks. Now, Hell of a Book is fast, it's often funny, and more often thought-provoking, and I think it'll be a staple for book clubs going forward. It was a read with Jenna pick in the summer, and it went on to win this year's National Book Award for Fiction in the fall. Publishers Weekly gave it a star review stating, "Absurdist metafiction doesn't get much better," and I agree with it. This is Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. This, of course, is Misery by Stephen King, two great books about writers in awkward situations. Come and find them at Mono County Libraries, or another great book to read. In the meantime, stay safe, get outside and get some fresh air if you can, and happy reading.